I have a pretty fun and powerful build to showcase today, capable of taking down all of the new bosses added in 1.1, and I don't want to waste any time, so let's just get right into it. This is a build guide for the Toxic Swarm Druid. First off, I'll give you a quick rundown on the build and how it works. This utilizes the Plague Dragon's Tongue, a brand new unique spear added in Cycle 2, aka 1.1. And the chosen mastery here is Druid, so we can get access to Entangling Roots and Swarmblade form, which are two very important skills, as well as a ton of defensive options in the passive tree of Druid. Originally, this build heavily revolved around the Serpent Venom node in the Serpent Strike tree, which was hitting extremely hard. At level 78, I was getting millions of damage from the Serpent Venom procs, but as some of you may already know, this was a bug and it was scaling way higher than intended. That being said, I had to switch around the playstyle to a more minion-focused build, which essentially functions the same and even felt smoother to play. With upwards of 22 locusts summoned at once thanks to the new unique spear, raising that maximum locust count, as well as summon Spriggan and summon Scorpion. We now have an army of minions to ramp tons of damage over time effects, such as Bleed, Frostbite, and most notably, Poison. The clear speed is pretty decent. As you run around in Swarmblade form, you just have to maintain Locust Swarm, which is a massive poison AoE around your character, and it'll take care of all of the basic mobs. And then of course the army of minions will be useful for shredding down elites and bosses, which we can target by pressing the hotkey A, and it will be used to control your minions. The single target damage is where this build shines, and bosses will be really easy to take down. As for the ability to stay alive in this build, it is pretty tanky. We're going to have a ton of health and endurance threshold. Almost more than half of our HP is going to be covered by endurance, which gives us a 60% damage reduction, and we will have a ton of health regen coming in from our gear and the passive tree, which I will talk about later in the video. Now let's take a look at the lineup of skills. Keep in mind this will be a brief overview to explain why I chose certain nodes, and I will post a link in the description to the actual build planner so that you can build off of that. Starting with the first skill, Serpent Strike. This is the core damage ability for the build, which also summons a Primal Serpent for an additional minion that will spread even more poison and apply frailty stacks, further reducing the damage the enemy is going to deal. Serpent Venom is still used in this build to prevent enemies from landing critical strikes, alongside Shattered Immunity for more damage. Even though it was fixed in a patch update, it still adds more damage because of the sheer amount of poison stacks we get on bosses. Lastly, we pick up Venomous Union. This is used to proc the Scorpion Nova used by the next skill, Summon Scorpion. Now I actually started off using baby scorpions to get more poison stacks, as this was what I really wanted to use. I wanted to have a big army and little baby scorpions just sounded awesome. But ultimately, the poison pool from Venom Nova resulted in a lot more stacks of poison, because of the buff to attack speed and poison chance it applied to all minions. That being said, we do have plenty of ways to proc the Venom Nova while in Swarmblade form, which is the third skill in the lineup. Of course, we first want to grab Viper's Call, so the right-click Arm Blade strike uses Serpent Strike, followed by Endless Pressure. This is all we really need to keep us in Swarmblade form while we're clearing a monolith. Poison chance maxed out is a given, as well as additional locusts. Then we grab Bleed chance for some extra damage over time, and Bloodlust Swarm. This is going to add a massive buff to the clear speed of Locust Swarm. Lastly, we grab Inspiring Swarm. Like I said before, we're going to be able to proc a bunch of companion abilities, especially our Venom Nova from the Scorpion, while in Swarmblade form, and this is how we get that done. Next, I specialize into Summon Spriggan, which will provide a nice healing aura for the army of minions, and has the ability to passively summon vines for additional minions. These vines are going to be applying stacks of poison as well, further buffing our damage. The last skill here is Entangling Roots, which provides a massive burst window for fighting bosses and elites because of Venom Sting, adding a 75% chance to poison for every minion caught in the wave. Made easier to do by turning Entangling Roots into a massive circle around our character with Overgrown Garden. Entangling Roots is very strong in this build, and it turns it into a kind of hybrid human Swarmblade playstyle. We start off in Swarmblade, spawn our hives, summon a bunch of locusts, and then swap to human form to use Entangling Roots and massively buff the army of locusts that we just raised in Swarmblade form. And you just kind of keep swapping back and forth when you're fighting a boss between human form and Swarmblade form, keeping the uptime of your locusts and applying Entangling Roots buff to all your minions. As for the passives, I'm just going to fire these off real quick and only really touch on the important ones. Starting in the Primalist, we have 8 points into Primal Strength, 2 points into Gift of the Wilderness, 5 points Hunter's Restoration for a good amount of increased health, 5 points into Hunter's Emanation with a decent buff to our minions. Then we go over to Beastmaster, we have 8 points into Ursine's Strength, 2 points into Boarheart, 5 points into Call of the Pack, and 6 into Natural Fortitude. This is where we're going to get a lot of our health regen, and is what's going to keep us alive in this build. With 6 points, we get increased health regen per strength, and we're going to be stacking strength through our passives and our gear, adding a ton of health regen. And just for example, if you have 50 strength, that's going to be 100% increased health regen. I have 4 points into Envenom. Eventually I'll get this to 5 as I level up the build. And now we'll move over to the Druid passive tree. It's important to note that you have 20% increased health, and when leaving a transformed state, you gain 70% damage reduction for 2 seconds. And this is going to help us when we're switching between human and Swarmblade form to buff our minions, as we talked about earlier, and to summon our minions in Swarmblade form. Starting out, we get 7 points into Chitinous Plating for endurance and armor. Endurance is also going to be one of our defensive layers. 7 points into Claws of the Forest, 6 points Druidic Prowess, and 1 point into Blessed Springs. And I know this is probably where you're thinking increased cold damage. This is getting kind of weird. But it's so that we can get River Spirits. With 5 points allocated, we get Frostbite chance to all of our minions. And as I talked about earlier with Serpent Strike, Shattered Immunity is going to add damage to Serpent Venom per poison stack and Frostbite stack. So that's going to help our single target damage a lot by grabbing River Spirits, because you'll be able to get around 70 or 80 Frostbite stacks up. Then we grab 5 points in Wind in the Leaves, giving us some attack speed, and our minions will get a good amount of attack speed. Then we go all the way down the tree to Woodland Beings. 4 points into here so that we can get 8 points into Toxic Reach. This will give us a chance to summon a Vine on Kill, which will also spread our poison, and we get a ton of poison chance and minion poison chance. 6 points into Overgrowth is going to massively improve our survivability with our health regen. Then I have 8 points into Hide Skin. Eventually you'll want 10 points here, as this is just an incredible skill, adds a ton of defenses. And just for reference, I'm level 89 right now, so I have 11 more levels to go. And where I'm going to end up putting those is I will put 2 points into Primal Shifter, and then 5 points into Reincarnation. That will make it so that this buff applies to all of our minions, giving them 50% armor and 50% increased damage. This is just going to help a lot because, like I've said, when we're fighting bosses, we're going to be transferring from human form to Swarmblade form and back again, so we're going to constantly maintain this armor and damage buff. And that will cover our passive skills. Now, I'm still on the hunt for better gear, but here's a quick overview of what I am currently using. A lot of my gear is focused on minion damage and minion health, because I noticed that on certain boss fights, my minions would just get obliterated instantly. So I started investing into minion health on my gear, and it's helped me keep all my minions alive and healthy, which is important to maximizing the uptime of all the damage over time effects that they are going to apply. For all of your armor, you want to focus on adding a ton of health increases, flat strength, and health regeneration to keep you alive, followed by making sure your resistances are capped to further reduce incoming damage, and then make sure to have your endurance percent cap, which is 60%. Even I still haven't managed to get that. Don't worry too much about endurance threshold, because most of your endurance threshold comes from how much maximum life you have, because of our passive skills and because of the helmet that we chose to wear, which gives us maximum life as a percentage of endurance threshold. So prioritize maximum life. When it comes to idols, try to strike a balance between minion attack speed and minion damage over time. This provides a huge buff to our minion damage, and this is how we get poison stacks to that crazy 400 plus mark, which is just going to increase the damage of the minions and yourself. Like I said earlier, if you want to look at all the gear and skills in more detail, be sure to head over to the build planner that's linked in the description. I have really been enjoying the Toxic Swarm Druid this cycle, and it has been overperforming my expectations, even though the original version of the build turned out to be bugged. Anyways, that is all. I appreciate every one of you and all the comments you have been leaving. It has just been so badass. It's been awesome gaming alongside you guys. Make sure to subscribe and leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Thanks for chilling. I'm Manareth, and I'll be back. Peace.